We're going to be practicing some gas stoich problems, some things that you could possibly see with stoich whenever we're talking about gas STP. And so let's get into it. Our first question says, how many liters of CO2? How many is my question word? That question word is attached to the unit liters, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say X liters CO2 does 32 moles. So that's going to be my connection, 32 moles CO2. Oh, good, I'm in the same compound. Occupy at STP. So this is my initial setup. I see that I need to go between moles and liters, and I also see that I'm at STP, which means that I get to use that super great conversion for STP, that definitional thing, which is that for every 1 mole of a gas, which in this case is CO2, so I'll go ahead and put that, for every 1 mole of CO2, it occupies 22.4 liters, or for every 22.4 liters of CO2, that's 1 mole of CO2. And I can just go ahead and I'm gonna pick the version that allows me to cancel out moles of CO2. I need moles of CO2 to be on the bottom in order to cancel, which means that I will select this second one and I'm gonna go ahead and plug it in. 22.4 liters of CO2 will go on top. 1 mole of CO2 will go on the bottom. Mole CO2 allows me to cancel. Liter CO2 is the only English that I have left in my math, which is the unit that I said that I wanted. So that means I get to go ahead and I get to plug it in. So that's going to be 32 times 22.4, and that is going to be divided by 1. And so 32 times 22.4 divided by 1 gives me the number 716.8. That number is nice enough. I don't feel the need to round, so I'm not going to. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to attach the unit liters CO2. For this next problem, it says how many moles of Cl2, how many moles of chlorine, okay? X mole chlorine are present in, remember that's my equal sign, 52 liters. And that's gonna still be chlorine at STP, means that I get to use that handy dandy conversion. I'm gonna rewrite it over here. I'm gonna say for every 1 mole of chlorine, it will occupy 22.4 liters. And for every 22.4 liters of chlorine, there's 1 mole of chlorine. And now I just need to pick the one that will allow me to cancel liters. I currently have liters on the top, which means I need liters on the bottom for it to cancel, so I'll select this top one, and I'll plug it in, and I'll say for every 1 mole of chlorine, there is 22.4 liters of chlorine. Liter chlorine will cancel, leaving me with the unit moles chlorine, which is the unit that I stated that I wanted, which means that I can go ahead and plug it into the calculator. Everything on the top gets multiplied, so 52, 1, and I divide by everything on the bottom, so that's 22.4. So 52 times 1 divided by 22.4 gives me a number 2.321428571. This is a really long gross number. I don't really like it. I'm going to round it to 2 decimals, 1, 2. Look over to see if I need to round up. 1 does not make me round up. So my final answer would be 2.32, and I'm going to attach the unit that is left in my math, so moles of chlorine. Those were some pretty easy one-step problems. Now we're going to get into some that are a little bit more complicated, though not any more complicated than the things that you've already seen. So this is how many liters of Cl2. So I'm going to say X liters Cl2 are needed to produce, is going to be my equal sign, 3.6 moles of fluorine. Since a temperature and a pressure were not stated, we can go ahead and assume STP. So I'm going to go ahead, and since I know I'm going to need that conversion at some point, I'm going to go ahead and use it. I see that I have liters of chlorine, which means that my STP conversion needs to have chlorine in it. So I'll say for every 22.4 liters of chlorine, there's 1 mole of chlorine. Or for every 1 mole of chlorine, there is 22.4 liters of chlorine. And then I'm also seeing that I have 2 different compounds, which means I need my mole to mole ratio. I see chlorine, I see fluorine. The coefficient in front of chlorine right here is 1, so I'll say for every 1 mole of Cl2, there is 1 mole of F2 of fluorine. I didn't give myself enough room over here, so I'm going to go ahead and write over here. And I'll flip it. For every 1 mole of fluorine, there is 1 mole of chlorine. And now I can go ahead and start selecting my conversion factors to allow me to cancel. I see moles of fluorine, so I need to choose the conversion that has moles of fluorine in it. That is going to be my mole to mole ratio. I currently have moles of fluorine at the top, which means I need moles of fluorine at the bottom for it to cancel, so I'll choose this right one. Moles fluorine, moles fluorine. I'm left with moles of chlorine, but I want liters of chlorine. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to utilize my STP conversion, and I need to select the version that allows me to cancel out moles of chlorine. I currently have it at the top, which means I need it at the bottom for it to cancel. So I'll select that top one and I'll plug it in. Mole chlorine, mole chlorine. That leaves me with liters of chlorine, which is the unit that I said that I wanted, which means that I can go ahead and start plugging stuff in. I'll multiply everything on the top, so that's 3.6, 1, and 22.4, and I'll divide by everything on the bottom. That's 1 and 1. That gives me the number 80.64. That's a nice enough number. I don't feel the urge to round, so I'm not going to. And I'm just going to go ahead and see that the only English I have left in my math is liters chlorine, which is the thing that I said that I wanted. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to attach that unit here. For this very last problem, we see it asking how many liters of chlorine are needed to produce 3.6 liters of fluorine. Now this is going to be the longest version of a gas conversion that you will see, but we will attack this together. How many liters of chlorine means X liters chlorine are needed to produce 3.6 liters fluorine. I see liters of fluorine, which means I need my STP conversion for fluorine. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write it off to the side. For every 22.4 liters of fluorine, there is 1 mole of fluorine. That should be a 2. Or for every 1 mole of fluorine, there's 22.4 liters of fluorine. I also see that I have 2 different compounds, which means I need that mole to mole ratio again. I found fluorine, I found chlorine. I'm going to go ahead and find what the coefficients are in front of them. Coefficient in front of chlorine is 1, so I'll say for every 1 mole of chlorine, there is 1 mole of fluorine, because the coefficient in front of fluorine is 1, and I'll flip it in case I need it the other way. And I'll say for every 1 mole of fluorine, there is 1 mole of chlorine. And then finally, I see that I have that unit liters attached to chlorine, which does mean that I need to have my STP conversion for chlorine this time. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write it for every 22.4 liters of chlorine, there's 1 mole of chlorine, or for every 1 mole of chlorine, there's 22.4 liters of chlorine. Liters of fluorine is currently at the top, and it's the thing that I need to cancel, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to find the conversion that has liters of fluorine in it. That is going to be my STP conversion for fluorine. and I need to pick the version that has liters of fluorine at the bottom. That's going to be this right one, and I'll plug it in. Liters fluorine will cancel, leaving me with moles of fluorine. Now I need a conversion that has moles of fluorine in it. I cannot use the same conversion twice, so that means I am going to be using the mole-to-mole ratio here. I see that I currently have moles of fluorine at the top, which means I need to select the version of the conversion that has moles of fluorine at the bottom, and I'll plug it in. Mole fluorine will allow me to cancel, leaving me with moles of chlorine. That's not the unit that I wanted. I wanted liters of chlorine, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick the version of the conversion that allows me to cancel moles of chlorine. I can't use the conversion twice, so I will not use my mole-to-mole ratio, and instead I will use my STP conversion for chlorine, and this time I need moles on the very bottom so that it cancels, so I will choose this left version and I'll plug it in. Mole Cl2 will cancel, leaving me with liters of Cl2, which is the unit that I said that I wanted. So I can go ahead and I can plug everything into the calculator. I will multiply everything on the top, so that's 3.611 and 22.4, and I'll divide by everything on the bottom, which is 22.4, 1, and 1. And when I plug that into the calculator, 3.6 times 1 times 1 times 22.4 divided by 22.4 divided by 1 divided by 1, I get the number 3.6. Okay, that is because I used my STP conversion twice just for the different gases. And as you can see, 22.4 appears at the top and the bottom, so that means that they effectively canceled each other out. And since my mole-to-mole ratio between these two was 1-to-1, that also meant that effectively I was just multiplying by ones and dividing by ones, which means that my number will stay the same, and this will be 3.6 liters of chlorine.